Denis Villeneuve's paranoid drug lord hunt Sicario thrills with uber-cool CIA agent and Mexican hitman Alejandro on a cartel revenge trip, sponsored by the US government. Alejandro is followed around by the actual main character, nonplussed FBI agent Kate Macer, who is constantly out of her depth as she is pulled into a war on drugs that operates on schemes and power plays beyond her reach and comprehension. As the only woman in the movie, Kate feels like the product of a retrogressive story formula. Need a weak character. Make them female. But instead we can also read Sicario as a post-feminist dystopia. A feminist critique of a world where gender equality exists. But for one reason only: to stabilize and reproduce a culture of toxic male power. The deliberate disabling of the movie's female protagonist reveals how the social powers in play ultimately force female individuals into becoming quote-unquote women. When Kate wakes in a world solely inhabited by men, there is nothing that separates her from them. As the leader of a kidnap response team, she is introduced in action, showing the same skills and affections as her comrades. But when a bomb-rigged cellar blows up in their face, her professional control breaks down immediately. From now on, she is left absolutely clueless.
What's going on?
No idea.
The film goes out of its way to show that Kate has no real agency, no good judgment, and little competence, even in her area of expertise. During the final tactical operation, she has her own gun disabled, is gunned down by Alejandro, and finally engages CIA top dog Matt, who also overwhelms her easily enough. Kate limps and groans through all these scenes of righteous indignation and hot-headed bravado, without ever gaining the least bit of ground. Her attempt at doing things by the book only weakens her position and earns her nothing but reprimands.
That was fucking illegal. You want to start a war? You're a fucking spook. And him, I mean, who the fuck is that?
Told you could stay here.
Jesus Christ.
In Edge of Tomorrow, Emily Blunt played one of the toughest and physically capable female soldiers ever witnessed on the silver screen. But in Sicario, her character not only loses in every single fight after the first, but also reveals a body language that is meek, with insecurity showing on her face, hanging head, and avoiding eye contact. Kate's newly returned need for cigarettes underlines her weakness and loss of control. A male action hero would never have been humiliated in similar ways. So on top of it, Kate's extreme ineffectuality becomes, inevitably, connected to her gender. Although Kate is part of a world where other women are profoundly absent, she is at first not obviously treated as one. Even when she joins the team of high-strung hypermasculine agents, sheriffs, and soldiers, she is not sexualized or objectified. Kate doesn't act anything but professionally in a neutral and non-gendered way, quite in contrast to earlier action movie heroines who have to constantly prove their capabilities to their male counterparts by showing off with professional action and banter.
Hey Vasquez, have you ever been mistaken for a man?
No. Have you?
But when we see Kate barefoot, or in the bath, with let-down hair, she becomes wrapped in stereotypical imagery that depicts specifically female physical and mental vulnerability.
Look at you. Your eyebrows are a mess.
No, they're
You
not.
look like caterpillars. You look like wild beasts. You're losing weight.
I'm eating.
You get wear this one t-shirt a week? You need to work on your personal hygiene, huh?
When her partner Reggie derides Kate for letting herself go, the absurd equation of personal hygiene with making oneself pretty to look at, along with the fact that she is divorced, echoes the sexist trope that women who are accomplished professionals must have a ruined love life, and that it is their own fault because they are not invested enough in appearing sexually attractive to men.
Gotta get you a new bra, woman.
A list of things I need.
I'm just saying, some nice lacy something.
Yeah, it's been a while since someone's seen me in a bra except you.
Instead of rejecting this objectification, Kate hooks up with a crooked cop who turns her sexual vulnerability into violent action, the most commonly shown type of violence against women in movies. Not only is Kate not physically strong enough to fight off her attacker, his attempt to kill her is, apparently, her own fault.
It's you did this. You did this.
So Kate needs to be saved by Alejandro, who of course, apprehended the enemy's attempt to get at Kate. And even when she acknowledges her mistake, Alejandro corrects her, and shows her that she still has not understood the situation.
I just tried to have sex with my hitman.
He's no assassin. He just wanted to know what you know. They're after us, not you.
While the men in charge are proactive, controlled, and cold, and never run into complications, the only woman in the movie just doesn't seem to get it. Her sinister mentor Alejandro is stealthy but extremely masculine. He is brutal and ruthless, but he has a concrete and comprehensible motivation for his revenge mission which the audience can empathize with, something that Kate also lacks. But the idea, Sicario exposes women as weak and ineffectual when assuming male professionalism, would be just too annoying for a film released in the same year that saw Mad Max Fury Road, Star Wars The Force Awakens, or Jessica Jones displaying groundbreaking feminist genre fare in mainstream Western cinema. So what if something else is going on here entirely? What if the consistency of Kate's gender depiction and that of her all-male surroundings as secretive, manipulative, ruthless, and overpowering implies a powerful statement about gender roles in our society? Sicario justifies the Mexican policeman Silvio's smuggling of drugs for the cartel by showing him as a family man. He commits crimes in order to feed his wife and son. Similarly, Alejandro's violent actions against men, women, and children are justified by the murder of his own wife and daughter.
Lo siento por lo que pasó. Cuídate.
The film could have chosen any other backstory for these men, or none. But it always makes family the ultimate rationale for lawless and violent masculinity by casting women and children as the objectified and threatened foil of male identity.
Every night you have families killed. And yet, here you dine.
In fact, the men in the world of Sicario are so obsessed with the status of one another's family that, "Are you married?" has become the new, "How do you do?"
¿Está casado?
Sí, señor.
¿Hijos?
Sí.
¿Cómo está la esposa?
Está bien. Tenemos 2 hijos, 6 y 8 años.
Are you married?
Am I married?
Or do you have a husband?
Divorced?
Kids?
No. Anything else?
This obsession reveals that only by forcing women into roles of mothers, wives, or daughters, the men seem to be able to form an identity for themselves. Their greatest fear seems to be losing their families, and thereby losing their self-constitution, turning back into wolves devouring each other the moment the system gets out of control. Because, when the bomb explosion at the beginning of the movie physically disembodies male agents, it narratively and allegorically sets up the men's world of Darwinian survival, and a desperate need to bring back order into this chaos. What Kate doesn't understand is that the men inescapably need social roles like wives and children to constitute and uphold their own social role as men, and not as beasts. Opened up by her own feelings of failure, Kate gets inevitably dragged into these mechanics, and by this, becomes gendered herself. From being a tough, competent leader of an FBI special squad, she turns into a mere follower and observer of arcane CIA plottings, and ultimately ends up as a broken shadow of herself. When Alejandro breaks into her apartment in the final scene, easily penetrating her private space, and says,
You remind me of the daughter they took away from me.
He really needs her as the social construct of the daughter to become a man again, in this case, the social construct of the father. He not only stresses Kate's gender to undermine her agency, but also puts himself into the twofold power position of the father and of the killer of his daughter, rendering her utterly dependent and powerless.
You look like a little girl when you're scared.
Reading Sicario as a post-feminist dystopia is to understand it as an externalization of how it feels to be a woman in a society where women can supposedly achieve the same professional positions as men can, but where the patriarchy is still so strong and in constant fear of losing its self-identity that it not just keeps undermining women who attempt this, but even more so, uses them to legitimize this unjust subjugation. Upholding the social contract of gender equality is what is referred to in Sicario as doing things by the book.
He did this by the book, right?
Come on, of course.
All male characters in the movie acknowledge that actions have to be done by the book, although they constantly act against that very book. So they need Kate to legitimize their actions.
Just give me the girl.
That's why at the end of the movie, Alejandro forces Kate to sign the document.
It basically says that everything we did was done by the book.
This is a function that women fulfill in many social contexts of our real world, namely as institutionalized token women, who are put into position by a network of men to legitimize their male privilege.
So that's it. That's why I'm here.
Yeah, that's it. That's why you're here.
Kate is shown as being unable to escape this logic of male subjugation. That's why Sicario is a dystopia. It presents the men's world, the land of wolves, as completely pervasive.
Where have you taken me? What is this place?
It's a bar.
It's full of cowboys.
That this toxic masculinity on the individual level also exists on a societal level is made explicit when Kate's boss tells her that direct violations of the law, that is, using men like Alejandro against other men like Alejandro, are decided at the highest level of democratic government.
These decisions are made far from here, by officials elected to office, not appointed to them.
Ultimately, it is society as a whole that is corrupt, when the responsibility for male violence and revenge can be referred further and further upwards, until there is only the people left. Sicario's dystopia comes full circle at the end of the movie, when the soccer game of Silvio's son is interrupted by distant gunshots. It is then that we realize this boy will eventually be sucked into the cycle of male violence as well. In the end, the world will consist only of men like Alejandro, and women can only exist in this world as daughters, wives, or agents of legitimization, coerced to cooperate at gunpoint.
You would be committing suicide, Kate.
Alejandro's threat asserts his complete control over Kate. He decides whether she will live or die. And he even assumes power over the meaning of her death, thus denying her any meaningful sacrifice by refusing to sign the document. That's why Kate has to end up as the ultimate powerless and institutionalized woman. In this land of wolves, she only has the chance to live as wife or daughter, or don't live at all. The leader of the kidnap response team ultimately has to realize that there is no one alive to be rescued. Because only rotten corpses inhabit the lifeless households men have put them into. Sicario exposes nothing less than the deep-rooted and seemingly unbreakable social patterns of gender role construction, masked in tropes of drug war and revenge, but enacted in plain sight.